you're not going to make $100,000 in a year in a property when you're purchasing it today. That just doesn't happen anymore. It was a very short period of time that was happening, but now that Windsor-Essex and Southwestern Ontario has realized the value of property, we're going to see just small incremental changes in the prices.
I think that's the biggest concern for people, is that if I purchase a home, will it decrease in value because of the uncertainty out there in our world today?
Welcome back to another podcast where we look a little behind the stats and also give you some local information that we think you'd find interesting. So to start off, we've had a wicked winter, and a little different from what historically Windsor-Essex has brought us. So it's Groundhog Week is what we'll call it. Katherine, what does one of those little rodents say? What are they saying about the stats?
Oh, yeah. Wyerton Willie. So Wyerton Willie did not see his shadow. So he is forecasting an early spring. However, our American neighbors, Punxsutawney Phil, or something like that, he did see his shadow, and they are predicting 6 more weeks of winter. However, here in Windsor-Essex, we're going to stick with Wyerton Willie.
Yeah, we're going to stick with our Canadian forecast because we really are sick of winter. Historically, Windsor-Essex is in the banana belt. So the banana belt usually brings us warmer temperatures earlier than our friends up in, say, Ottawa, where they get double the amount of snow. So we have about 53 days of snow per season, and they're over, I think it's like 120 days in Ottawa, what they see. So definitely a lot warmer here in southwestern Ontario. And we have told a lot of people, move down here, enjoy the nice sunshine that Windsor-Essex brings. And this year was a little bit different. So we hope that the Canadian rodent is correct and that we see some early spring and that grass is just around the corner. So fingers crossed that's the case. And
golf season can start early.
Golf season can start early, absolutely. Speaking of golf and Groundhog's Day, our market is much of the same as it was last year. If you recall, we used the word boring as much of our market stats last year were very much the same, not much movement. And so far in January, we're looking at the same thing. So I'm gonna maybe tag boring is beautiful, and that we can predict that the rest of the year could be very much of the same as well. So our current year-to-date average is just under 570,000. So if you can recall, last year for 2025, we saw right around 570 for the entire year. So not a lot of change has happened there. We did see potentially more listings hit the market. And that, again, is the same story as what we saw last year. So over 1,000 listings hit the market for the month of January, but we only had 267 sales for residential in Windsor-Essex. So that, we have an oversupply, and that's led to, the buyers continuing to have the upper hand in our market. How long that will last, time will tell. We will be the first to tell you.
Speaking of price for the month of January, 550,000 and under, there were 170 sales, and above 550,000, there were 118.
So that's leading to a little bit more of a balanced market potentially. We are in the early months, obviously, of 2026, but we have seen some interest. If the property is just right, listed properly, we are seeing multiple offers. So like 10 to 15 offers on properties that, stand out amongst the others, because we've noticed, obviously, buyers, they want the right thing, they want the right price, they want the right location, and those things matter so much more today. So those listings that are standing out, they are moving a lot quicker than the ones that have unfortunately stayed stagnant for most of 2025 and into 2026 if we don't correct our path forward.
So headed into the spring, buyers have things that they didn't have before. Things like lower lending rates. So the Bank of Canada just held the interest rate at 2.25%, which is positive. There's more inventory out there, so there's lots of choice out there for buyers. And we're seeing stability in the market, which means there's stability with prices. And I think that's going to be an important word for 2026.
I think perhaps the theme of this entire podcast could just be Groundhog Day, because it is very much a repetition, not only with that stability we saw last year moving into this year, but also the interest rates. So we didn't see too many, we got down to a level with our interest rates that I think we're going to be here for a while. So people continuously are waiting for that drop, as though interest rates are going to get lower. But we're seeing people with great rates right now and held at 2.25. That's not going to change. There are big banks in Canada. They're predicting that's going to stay that way till the end of 2027. So what does that mean for you? That means stop waiting on the sidelines, right? The only thing that we're missing in the equation of sales is the buyers. So we have a record amount of inventory. We have a record amount of, movements that have made a positive direction in affordability. And yet that buyer is still on the sidelines. So if you're waiting for the drop, it's just not happening. Windsor-Essex has proved that last year for an entire calendar year. And so far we're looking to be that same way for 2026. So now's your time to jump in, and I would not hesitate another day.
I think a big thing for buyers is if they buy a house right now, they want to know, will it decrease in value? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest fear. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, but I think the correction has already happened in between 2022 and 2024. But I think that's the biggest concern of a lot of buyers out there, especially first-time home buyers. Mm-hmm. If you're buying and selling in the same market, then they offset one another. If the market is up, then you sell for more, and then you buy for more, and then the opposite is the same. So, but I think that's the biggest concern for people, is that if I purchase a home, will it decrease in value because of the uncertainty out there in our world today?
So Phil Soper, our CEO of Royal Lepage, he was here last week in Windsor and helped us host our kickoff for Royal Lepage Buying to Real Estate. What he said essentially was that Canadians, they're not defaulting in their mortgage as much as news articles are really suggesting, right? Canadians have not gone, into default as much as, let's say, our neighbors across the border. So that's a good thing for Canada. And I think a lot of people are expecting that to change, but I don't see it happening. We have a lot of renewals. Of course, there's going to be some people that purchased in higher times, and they may have some trouble when it comes down to it, but we hope that the stress test that was implemented during those peak times with low interest rates will assist people to get to the other side. And we're seeing favorable rates that really shouldn't put somebody deep into debt, being able to remortgage their properties, which will continue to happen into the end of the year for people who had interest rates lower than 2%, which will never happen in the foreseeable future, again, because it just really put us into an unusual market that, again, we can't repeat. And this is definitely more stable and a manageable market for someone to get into. I think it's important to state, traditionally, buyers are purchasing properties and they're staying there for 5 years, right? They're not moving on within a year or two. If you're moving on within a year or two, you may lose money, right? So that idea, you saying basically people are worried about their investment, that they're going to lose value. You have to stay in a house in order to reap the benefits of that. You're not going to make $100,000 in a year in a property when you're purchasing it today. That just doesn't happen anymore. It was a very short period of time that was happening. But now that Windsor-Essex and Southwestern Ontario has realized the value of property, we're going to see just small incremental changes in the prices. We're not going to see big leaps where people are walking away with $200,000. And on the flip side, we're going to see people actually lose some money if they're having to sell their property that they purchased in the peak of our market.
So here's the thing. Historically speaking, 2.25% is very low. And their prediction is that things will be holding steady. So buyers can look forward to that.
We were going to dive into some next star conversation and potentially other exciting things that are happening in Windsor-Essex to fuel job growth. However, there's a lot of things that have come up in the news the past few days, and so we're going to put a pin in that. And next month, we hope to bring you the full picture and what's happening in Windsor-Essex and what that means for you as an investor or just a resident of Windsor-Essex.
So to recap, we're going to have an early spring. There's stable rates out there, and it's time to go buy a house. So thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next month.